You want to know about humans? Oh, where do I even begin with these absolutely ridiculous creatures? I am Zorthka, Senior War Analyst for the Galactic Unity Council, and I have spent the better part of 3 rotations trying to understand why these pink, squishy bipeds refuse to follow basic military logic. Today, I am going to tell you about Commander Elena Torres and how she managed to win a war while being quite literally dead. Yes, you heard that correctly. Dead. As in, no pulse, no brain activity, colder than the vacuum of space itself. And yet somehow, her tactical genius continued to operate like a phantom in our combat networks. But I am getting ahead of myself, aren't I? Let me start from the beginning. When these humans first stumbled into our perfectly organized corner of the galaxy with their rickety ships and their complete disregard for proper military hierarchy, the Kryllian Empire had been expanding for centuries, consuming worlds like a hungry void beast, and we had calculated their inevitable victory with mathematical precision. Our computers projected total galactic domination within 2 standard cycles. Everything was predictable, orderly, logical. Then the humans showed up and threw all our calculations straight into a black hole. I remember the first briefing about Earth's military structure. Their chain of command made absolutely no sense. They had something called non-commissioned officers, who could override commissioned officers in certain situations. They had soldiers who could disobey direct orders if they deemed them unlawful. They had this concept called initiative, that encouraged subordinates to act independently of their superiors. My tentacles were practically twitching with confusion. How could any military function with such chaotic organization? Our Kryllian enemies followed strict hierarchical patterns. Remove the head, the body dies. Simple, efficient, effective. We had been using this strategy successfully for millennia. But humans? Humans were like some kind of military hydra. Cut off one head, and 3 more would sprout, each one angrier and more determined than the last. Commander Elena Torres was 32 Earth years old when she volunteered for what the humans called Operation Last Stand. The name alone should have been a warning. Who volunteers for something called Last Stand? Only humans, apparently. They have this bizarre tendency to run toward danger instead of away from it, which violates every survival instinct programmed into rational beings. Elena Torres was not particularly tall by human standards, standing at approximately 1.6 meters. She had dark hair that she kept tied back in what humans call a ponytail, and brown eyes that seemed to see everything at once. Her voice was calm, measured, but carried an undertone of absolute authority that made even our largest Gorithi warriors pause when she spoke. The Kryllian fleet had just finished glassing the colony world of New Madrid. 17 million human civilians, reduced to radioactive ash in less than 4 hours. The images reached Earth's command structure within days, and I watched through our intelligence networks as their leaders gathered for emergency sessions. This is where humans do something that still baffles our greatest military minds. Instead of surrendering, instead of negotiating, instead of following any logical response to overwhelming force, they got angry. Not just angry, furious, vengeful. They began planning attacks that had less than a 5% survival probability. Elena Torres stood before her assembled fleet commanders, all of them knowing they were about to embark on what was essentially an elaborate suicide mission. The Kryllian armada numbered over 8,000 vessels. The human response force, 437 ships, most of them retrofitted cargo haulers and mining vessels armed with whatever weapons they could strap on. We cannot win this fight through conventional tactics, Torres announced to her captains, her voice carrying across the communication channels with crystal clarity. The Kryllians have superior numbers, superior firepower, and superior positioning. By every mathematical model, we should surrender now and save ourselves the trouble. A pause. Her human officers waited, knowing there was more coming. However, Torres continued, and I swear I could hear the smile in her voice, mathematics has never met human stubbornness before. We are going to do something so completely insane, so thoroughly unpredictable, that their computers will crash trying to calculate our probability of success. What followed was the most elaborate military plan I had ever witnessed. Torres had studied every recorded Kryllian battle for the past century, analyzing their response patterns, their tactical preferences, Their command structures. She had identified exactly 17 critical weaknesses in their standard formation. But here is where it gets interesting. Torres did not plan to exploit these weaknesses herself. Instead, she designed a strategy that would force the Kryllians to expose these vulnerabilities through their own reactions. She was not just playing war, she was playing psychology. A human fleet approached the Kryllian position near the Centauri system in what appeared to be a standard frontal assault. Predictable, desperate, doomed to fail. Our analysts calculated a 97% probability of complete human destruction within the first hour of combat. The battle began exactly as expected. The Kryllian commander, a methodical strategist named Fex Fall, ordered his forces into their traditional sphere formation. Overwhelming firepower concentrated at the center, support vessels arranged in protective layers, command ships safely positioned at the rear. Torres ordered her fleet to charge directly into the center of this formation. It was suicide. Pure, unadulterated suicide. Even the humans knew it. I watched their communication channels, expecting to see panic, fear, desperate last words. Instead, I heard laughter. Elena Torres was actually laughing as her ship, the UHMS Defiance, led the charge into certain destruction. All units, remember your timing, she broadcast. Wait for the signal, then show these tentacled bullies what human creativity looks like. The first wave of human ships struck the Kryllian formation and exploded magnificently, exactly as predicted. The Kryllians began tightening their sphere, concentrating firepower to eliminate the remaining human vessels quickly and efficiently. That is when Torres gave her signal, not through traditional communication channels, which the Kryllians could intercept, but through a method so simple, so primitive that their advanced technology completely missed it. She detonated her own ship's reactor. The explosion was visible across 3 star systems, a brilliant flash that lit up the darkness of space like a miniature sun. Every human captain saw it. Every human officer understood its meaning. The real attack began immediately. You see, the charge into the Kryllian center had not been an attack at all. It had been a delivery system. Those ships that exploded so spectacularly had not been destroyed by enemy fire. They had been remotely detonated by their own crews, after depositing thousands of tiny, nearly undetectable devices throughout the Kryllian formation. Neural disruptors, frequency jammers, gravity well generators, electromagnetic pulse devices. All of them activated simultaneously when Torres sacrificed her own ship to provide the signal. Within seconds, the perfectly organized Kryllian sphere descended into complete disorder. Their formation collapsed, their communication networks failed, their navigation systems began reporting contradictory readings. Ships that had been moving in perfect synchronization suddenly found themselves drifting blind through space, unable to coordinate with their neighboring vessels. The remaining human fleet, which had been hiding behind a nearby asteroid field, emerged like wolves attacking a scattered herd. They were still outnumbered 20-1, but the Kryllians could no longer bring their numerical advantage to bear effectively. But here is where the story becomes truly impossible. Elena Torres was dead. We confirmed this through multiple sensors. Her ship's reactor core had detonated with the force of a small star. No life form could survive such destruction. The laws of physics simply do not allow it. Yet somehow the human fleet continued to execute her tactical plan with perfect precision. The surviving human commanders received new orders every few minutes, adjustments to the original strategy that accounted for changing battlefield conditions. These orders were transmitted on Torres' personal command frequency, using her authorization codes. Carrying her distinctive tactical signature, Captain Marcus Webb, commanding the destroyer UHMS Vengeance, actually questioned these transmissions during the battle. Command, requesting verification of source authority. Torres' confirmed KIA, who is providing tactical updates. The response came immediately. In Elena Torres' own voice, Captain Webb, this is Torres. I am currently experiencing some technical difficulties with my physical form. Please focus on your assigned targets and trust the plan. Webb's response perfectly summarized the human approach to impossible situations. Understood, command. Continuing mission as ordered. They did not question how their dead commander was still issuing orders. They simply accepted it and kept fighting. Over the next 6 hours I watched the impossible unfold before my sensory organs. The human fleet, outnumbered and outgunned, systematically dismantled one of the most powerful military formations in galactic history. Every move they made seemed to anticipate the Kryllian response. Every tactical decision exploited weaknesses that should not have been visible from their position. It was as if Elena Torres had somehow transcended physical death and become a pure tactical intelligence, guiding her forces with superhuman precision. Commander Thexval, the Kryllian leader, grew increasingly desperate as his seemingly inevitable victory transformed into humiliating defeat. He began making erratic decisions, abandoning proven strategies in favor of increasingly aggressive attacks. This only accelerated his forces' destruction, as each desperate gambit played directly into what appeared to be Torres' grand strategy. The human communications during this period were unlike anything in our military databases. They spoke to their dead commander as if she were still alive, reporting status updates, requesting clarification, even engaging in what humans call banter. Torres, this is Lieutenant Amy Kim on the Intrepid. We have successfully eliminated Target Cluster 7. Should we proceed to Cluster 8? Or would you prefer we stick around and watch these Kryllian ships explode for a while? Because I have to admit, the view is pretty spectacular. The response came without hesitation. Proceed to Cluster 8, Lieutenant. Save the sightseeing for after we have won this war. And Kim? Nice work on that torpedo spread. I taught you well. Lieutenant Kim actually smiled at this praise from her deceased commander. Yes, ma'am. Moving to engage Cluster 8 now. By the 8th hour of combat, the Kryllian formation was in complete collapse. Ships were fleeing in random directions, their command structure in ruins, their tactical coordination non-existent. What had begun as a certain victory for superior numbers had become a masterclass in human tactical innovation. Commander Thexval's flagship, the Inevitable Conquest, was one of the last vessels to fall. As human forces closed in for the final attack, we intercepted his final transmission to the Kryllian High Command. This is impossible. Their commander is dead. We confirmed the destruction of her vessel hours ago. How are they still receiving tactical guidance? How are they coordinating these attacks? It is as if they are being led by a ghost. The human response to this transmission came not from any surviving officer, but from Elena Torres' command frequency. Commander Thexval, this is Torres. You are correct. I am dead. But apparently human stubbornness extends beyond the limitations of physical existence. Surrender now and your surviving crews will be treated according to galactic conventions. The Thexval's reply was a mixture of confusion and grudging respect. How is this possible? The dead do not command starships. Torres' final transmission during that battle has become legendary among human military forces. Commander, you are operating under the false assumption that human leadership requires a pulse. We tend to disagree with that assessment. This is Torres commanding from beyond the grave, and you have officially lost this war. The Inevitable Conquest surrendered 17 minutes later. As I compiled my report on this engagement, I struggled to explain what had occurred. The humans had achieved a tactical victory that violated multiple laws of physics, military science, and basic logic. Their dead commander had continued to provide strategic guidance hours after her confirmed destruction. My tentacles ached from the stress of trying to reconcile these observations with known reality. But the most disturbing part, this was not an isolated incident. As the war against the Kryllian Empire continued, similar events began occurring throughout human-controlled space. Dead officers providing tactical advice, destroyed ships sending navigation updates, fallen soldiers giving encouragement to their surviving comrades. It was as if the humans had discovered some method of preserving military leadership beyond physical death, turning their fallen commanders into immortal tactical advisors. The Galactic Unity Council demanded explanations. Our greatest scientists proposed theories ranging from advanced artificial intelligence to quantum consciousness transfer. Some suggested the humans had developed technology that could preserve neural patterns after biological death. Others hypothesized about parallel dimension communication or temporal displacement effects. But I had begun to suspect something far more disturbing. something that challenged our fundamental understanding of how warfare, leadership, and even reality itself operated. The humans were not using advanced technology to preserve their dead commanders. They were simply refusing to accept that death meant the end of duty. Elena Torres was still commanding her fleet because her officers believed she was still commanding her fleet. Her tactical guidance continued because her captains trusted her strategic vision completely. Her voice appeared on communication channels because her crew needed to hear it. The humans had weaponized faith itself. This revelation terrified me more than any conventional military technology. How do you defeat an enemy that refuses to acknowledge the finality of death? How do you break the morale of soldiers who believe their fallen leaders are still watching over them? How do you calculate victory probabilities when the opposing force operates on principles that defy mathematical analysis? The war was far from over, but already I could see the trajectory. The Kryllian Empire, despite their numerical superiority and technological advantages, was fighting an enemy that followed completely different rules. They were trying to win a conventional war against opponents who had transcended conventional limitations. As I prepared my preliminary report for the Unity Council, one question dominated my thoughts. If Elena Torres could continue commanding after death, if human leadership could survive the destruction of the physical form, what other impossible capabilities were these creatures hiding? And more importantly, how were we supposed to fight alongside them in future conflicts, when we could not even understand the basic principles governing their military effectiveness? The humans had introduced variables into galactic warfare that our computers could not process. They had transformed war from a mathematical exercise into something approaching art, or magic, or madness. Elena Torres was dead. Her body was cold, her ship destroyed, her physical existence terminated beyond any possibility of revival. But her command still burned like a star in the darkness, guiding her forces toward victories that should have been impossible. And somehow, that terrified me more than the prospect of defeat itself. 3 rotations later, I was still losing sleep over the Elena Torres situation. My report to the Unity Council had been met with what humans might call polite skepticism and what I would call complete denial of observable reality. The High Command insisted that I must have misinterpreted the data. Dead beings do not issue military orders. This was a fundamental law of existence. Clearly, the High Command had never met a human before. The war against the Kryllian Empire had escalated beyond anyone's predictions. After their humiliating defeat at Centauri, the Kryllians had abandoned their traditional tactics entirely. They began using scorched earth strategies, destroying entire star systems rather than allowing them to fall under human control. Their logic was sound. If they could not have these territories, no one would. The human response to this escalation was typically infuriatingly human. They did not retreat. They did not negotiate. Instead, they began what they called Operation Phoenix Rising, which involved hunting down every Kryllian command vessel in the galaxy and systematically destroying them. And Elena Torres was still leading the charge. I had managed to secure clearance for direct observation of human fleet operations, ostensibly to provide tactical analysis for potential Unity Council intervention. In reality, I was desperately trying to solve the mystery that was slowly driving me insane. How was a dead human continuing to command a fleet? My first clue came during the assault on the Kryllian stronghold at Rigel 7. The human task force, now expanded to over 800 vessels, approached the heavily fortified system with what appeared to be reckless abandon. The Kryllians had turned 3 moons into weapons platforms, each one capable of destroying a dozen ships with a single concentrated barrage. Captain Marcus Webb, now promoted to admiral after his performance at Centauri, was coordinating the assault from his flagship, the UHNS Retribution. I monitored their tactical communications, expecting to hear the usual pre-battle preparations. Orders, status reports, weapons checks. Instead, I heard something that made my scales crawl with confusion. "Torres, this is Webb," the admiral announced to his apparently empty command bridge. "We are in position for the assault. The Kryllians have arranged their defenses exactly as you predicted. Should we proceed with the Gamma 7 approach, or would you prefer something more creative?" A pause. No response came through any communication channel. But Webb nodded as if he had received an answer. "Understood. Gamma 7 it is. All units, you heard the commander. Execute Gamma 7 on my mark. I immediately contacted Webb's communication officer, a sharp-eyed lieutenant named Rachel Park. Lieutenant, this is Analyst Zorth Ka. I am monitoring your tactical channels for Unity Council review. I did not detect any response to Admiral Webb's query. Could you clarify the source of his tactical guidance? Lieutenant Park's response was delivered with the casual tone humans used when discussing weather patterns. Oh, that's just Torres giving Webb the go-ahead for Gamma 7. She always gets quiet before the big engagements. Helps her focus. Lieutenant, I need to clarify something. Commander Elena Torres was confirmed killed in action 3 rotations ago. Her ship was completely destroyed. How is she providing tactical guidance? Park paused, and I could hear the confusion in her voice. Sir, with respect, Torres is right here on the bridge. She's standing next to Admiral Webb's command station. She just nodded when he asked about Gamma 7. I quickly activated my visual sensors, scanning the bridge of the UHLS. Retribution. Admiral Webb stood at his command station, surrounded by his officers. The bridge was clearly visible through their external cameras. Elena Torres was nowhere to be seen. Lieutenant Park, I am currently observing your bridge through external sensors. I count 17 personnel present. Commander Torres is not among them. Another pause. Longer this time. Then Park's voice tinged with what humans call attitude. Sir, I don't know what kind of sensors you are using, but Torres is standing right there. Brown hair in a ponytail. About 1.6 meters tall, wearing her lucky combat jacket. She's got that look she gets when she's calculating probability matrices in her head. I felt my tentacles beginning to knot themselves with stress. This human was describing Elena Torres with perfect accuracy, including details about her appearance that had not been included in any official records. She was describing a dead woman as if she were standing 3 meters away. Lieutenant, could you ask Commander Torres to respond to a direct communication request? Sure thing. Hey Torres, the Unity Council analyst wants to talk to you. I watched Admiral Webb turn toward an empty section of the bridge and smile. She said she's too busy planning your defeat to chat with outside observers right now, but she appreciates your interest in human tactical doctrine. At this point, I was beginning to question my own sanity. Either every human in this fleet was participating in an elaborate psychological operation, or they were genuinely seeing and hearing their dead commander. Neither possibility was particularly comforting. The assault on Rachel 7 proceeded exactly as Torres had apparently planned. The human fleet approached the moon-based weapons platforms in 3 distinct waves, each one following a flight pattern that seemed to deliberately expose them to maximum enemy fire. The Kryllian defenders opened up with everything they had, pouring devastating energy beams into the approaching human ships. And the humans flew straight through those energy beams as if they were harmless light shows. Not around them, not deflecting them. Through them. I checked my sensors 3 times to confirm what I was observing. The Kryllian weapons were firing at full power. The energy readings were off the scale. Those beams should have vaporized anything they touched, but the human ships passed through them completely unharmed, as if the deadly energy simply did not exist. What in the name of the void? I muttered, frantically recalibrating my detection equipment. That is when I noticed something that made my blood freeze in my veins. The human ships were not actually flying through the energy beams. They were flying through the spaces between the energy beams, following flight paths that threaded through gaps in the defensive fire with millimeter precision. But those gaps were not static. They were moving, shifting, changing with each microsecond as the Kryllian weapons tracked their targets. To navigate through such a defense pattern would require the ability to predict the exact position of every enemy weapon at every moment of the engagement. The computational requirements were beyond the capacity of any known artificial intelligence. Yet somehow, every human pilot was executing these impossible maneuvers flawlessly, as if they were following a detailed map of the constantly shifting safe zones. I opened a channel to Admiral Webb. Admiral, I need to understand how your pilots are navigating through the Kryllian defensive fire. The precision required should be mathematically impossible. Webb's response was cheerful, as if I had asked about the weather. Oh, that's easy. Corvus is calling out the safe zones for each pilot individually. She can see the patterns in the defensive fire that the rest of us miss. It's like she's got some kind of supernatural awareness of battlefield dynamics. Admiral, I am observing your bridge. Torres is not present. Who is actually providing the navigation data? Torres is right here, analyst. She's standing at the tactical display, pointing out the flight paths for each squadron. She's actually quite impressive to watch. It's like she can see the entire battle from a dozen different angles simultaneously. I switched my visual feed to maximum magnification and focused on the area Webb was indicating. The tactical display was active, showing the real-time positions of all ships in the engagement. But the space around it was completely empty. No one was standing there. No one was pointing out flight paths. Yet as I watched, I could see the display updating with navigation data that was somehow being input in real time. Flight paths appeared on the screen, highlighting safe corridors through the Kryllian defensive fire. These paths were being drawn by invisible hands, calculated by a mind that had no physical presence. The assault concluded with complete human victory and 0 casualties. Every Kryllian weapons platform was destroyed. Every human ship returned to formation unharmed. It was a tactical masterpiece that should have been impossible to execute. After the battle, I requested permission to board the UHNS Retribution for a direct interview with Admiral Webb. My official purpose was tactical debriefing. My actual purpose was to solve this mystery before it completely destroyed my understanding of reality. Webb received me in his ready room, a small chamber adjacent to the main bridge. He was a tall human with graying hair and eyes that held the confidence of someone who had survived impossible odds multiple times. He offered me a chair, though my anatomy made the gesture somewhat pointless. Admiral, I need to discuss the tactical coordination I observed during the assault. Your fleet executed maneuvers that required impossible levels of precision and timing. How are you achieving this level of coordination? Webb leaned back in his chair and smiled. Torres has always been our secret weapon. She sees patterns that the rest of us miss, connections that aren't obvious until she points them out. She's got an intuitive understanding of how battles flow that goes beyond anything you can teach in military academy. Admiral Elena Torres has been dead for 3 rotations. Her ship was destroyed at Centauri. How are you receiving tactical guidance from a deceased officer? Webb's expression did not change. He continued to speak as if I had asked about standard operating procedures. Torvax isn't dead, analyst. She's standing right behind you. I turned, my sensors sweeping the space behind my position. Nothing. Empty air. Yet Webb was looking directly at this empty space with the attention of someone engaged in active conversation. Admiral, there is no one behind me. My sensors detect no additional life forms in this room. Torres says your sensors are calibrated for living beings. She's operating on a different frequency now. What does that mean? Webb paused, as if listening to something I could not hear. Then he looked directly at me with an expression of profound seriousness. She says you are asking the wrong questions. The question isn't how she can still command after death. The question is why you assume death means the end of duty. I felt my scales ripple with something approaching fear. This conversation was moving into territory that challenged every assumption about existence itself. Admiral, duty is performed by living beings. Dead individuals cannot fulfill obligations because they no longer exist. Torres disagrees. She says duty isn't limited by physical constraints. It's a choice that transcends biological functions. She chose to protect humanity, and that choice doesn't expire just because her body stopped working. Webb stood and walked to the viewport, looking out at the stars beyond. You know what the difference is between your species and ours. When you die, you stop. When we die, we get stubborn about it. That makes no logical sense. Logic is overrated. Torres taught us that. Webb turned back toward me, but his eyes were focused on the empty space next to my position. She's asking if you want to understand how this really works. Against my better judgment, I found myself nodding. Webb activated his personal communicator. All department heads report to Conference Room Alpha. Bring your full staff. We are going to show our Unity Council observer how human command structure really operates. 20 minutes later, I found myself in a large conference room surrounded by 30 of the ship's senior officers. They had arranged themselves around a central holographic display showing the current positions of both human and Kryllian fleets throughout the sector. Admiral Webb stood at the head of the table. "Ladies and gentlemen, our observer has been trying to understand how we maintain tactical coordination. I think it's time we showed him the truth about human military doctrine." Webb gestured toward an empty chair at the head of the table. "Torres, would you like to explain our operational philosophy?" Every human officer in the room turned to look at that empty chair. They waited as if expecting a response. Then simultaneously they nodded. Captain Lisa Martinez, the ship's executive officer, spoke first. "Torres always taught us that effective command isn't about giving orders. It's about creating a shared understanding of the mission that's so complete, so unified, that individual decisions automatically support the collective goal." Lieutenant Commander David Kim continued the explanation. "When Torres plans an operation, she doesn't just tell us what to do, she helps us understand why we are doing it, how it fits into the larger strategy, what the enemy is likely to do in response. By the time we enter combat, we are all thinking with the same tactical awareness." Commander Sarah Walsh, the chief tactical officer, added her perspective. "Torres trained us to see the battlefield the way she sees it, to anticipate enemy movements, to recognize opportunities, to understand the flow of combat at an intuitive level. We don't need constant communication because we already know what she would want us to do in any given situation." I was beginning to understand, and the realization terrified me more than any weapon. "You are saying that Torres created a shared tactical consciousness among her officers, that you are all thinking with her strategic awareness?" Webb nodded. "Exactly. Torres didn't just command this fleet, she taught us to command it the way she would. Her tactical philosophy, her strategic approach, her understanding of combat dynamics, all of it is now part of how we think. But you are still receiving direct communication from her." "I have monitored these exchanges." Commander Walsh smiled. "Are we receiving communication, or are we accessing our own internalized understanding of how Torres would respond to any given situation? After working with someone for years, learning their thought processes, understanding their decision-making patterns, is there really a difference?" I felt my worldview cracking like an eggshell. "You are suggesting that Elena Torres is not actually communicating with you. You are suggesting that you have internalized her command style so completely that you can predict her responses to any tactical situation." "We are suggesting," Admiral Webb said quietly, "that the distinction between those two possibilities might not be as important as you think it is." The holographic display suddenly activated, showing a new formation of Kryllian ships entering the sector. Every human officer turned to look at the empty chair at the head of the table. They waited for several seconds, then began discussing response options with perfect coordination. "Torres wants us to use the Sigma-3 approach," Captain Martinez announced. "Hit them fast. Hit them hard. Don't give them time to establish defensive positions." "Agreed," said Commander Kim. "She's highlighting the weak points in their formation. If we approach from vectors 7 and 12 simultaneously, we can collapse their entire defensive structure in under 10 minutes. Torres is reminding us about their communication lag," added Commander Walsh. "Their command ship is positioned in the rear of the formation. By the time they realize what we are doing, it will be too late for them to coordinate an effective response." I watched this exchange with growing amazement. These officers were conducting a detailed tactical planning session with a dead woman, and they were doing it so naturally that they seemed unaware of how impossible it was. "How do you know these are Torres's strategic preferences?" I asked. Admiral Webb turned toward the empty chair, paused as if listening, then looked back at me. "She says the answer is simple. We know because we learned from the best teacher in the galaxy. Every tactical decision we make is filtered through years of training, guidance, and shared experience. Torres didn't just give us orders. She taught us to think like her. And when you think like her, we are her," Commander Walsh completed. "Her tactical awareness, her strategic vision, her understanding of human nature and enemy psychology, all of it lives on in the officers she trained." The fleet engagement that followed was a masterpiece of coordination. The human ships moved with perfect synchronization, executing complex maneuvers that required split-second timing. Every captain seemed to know exactly what every other captain was going to do. Every tactical decision supported the overall strategy flawlessly. The Kryllian formation collapsed in 8 minutes and 37 seconds. As I watched the enemy ships retreating in disorder, I finally understood what I had been witnessing. Elena Torres had not transcended death through advanced technology or supernatural intervention. She had done something far more impressive. She had created perfect tactical disciples. Her command style, her strategic philosophy, her understanding of warfare had been so completely absorbed by her officers that they no longer needed her physical presence to access her guidance. They had become extensions of her tactical consciousness. When they spoke to her, they were accessing their own internalized understanding of how she would respond. When they received her orders, they were acknowledging decisions they already knew she would make. When they saw her on the bridge, they were recognizing the part of themselves that thought like her. Elena Torres was dead, but her command lived on in every officer she had trained, every tactical doctrine she had established, every strategic principle she had taught. She had created something that no weapons could destroy, a military philosophy that could survive the death of its creator. The humans had not weaponized faith. They had weaponized education. I submitted my final report to the Unity Council 6 cycles later. In it, I explained that human military effectiveness was not based on superior technology or unusual tactical innovations. It was based on their ability to create perfect intellectual unity among their command structures. Human officers did not just follow orders, they internalized the strategic awareness of their superiors so completely that they could operate independently while maintaining perfect coordination with the overall mission. A human commander could die, but their tactical philosophy would continue to guide their subordinates indefinitely. This made human military forces nearly impossible to decapitate. Destroying their command structure did not eliminate their coordination because every officer carried the strategic awareness of their superiors. Kill a human general, and their colonels would continue executing the same strategy. Kill the colonels, and their majors would take over seamlessly. The Kryllian Empire surrendered 18 cycles later, after their entire command structure was systematically eliminated by human forces that seemed to anticipate every defensive strategy. The war ended not because the humans had superior numbers or better weapons, but because they had created a form of military organization that was virtually indestructible. Elena Torres received a posthumous promotion to Fleet Admiral and was declared the architect of humanity's first major galactic victory. Her tactical doctrines became standard curriculum in human military academies. Her strategic philosophy influenced an entire generation of officers. But the real monument to her achievement was simpler than any formal recognition. It was the fact that human ships throughout the galaxy continued to receive guidance from their fallen commanders, continued to execute impossible tactical maneuvers, continued to win battles that should have been unwinnable. Elena Torres was cold, dead, scattered across the vacuum of space. But her command burned like an eternal flame in the hearts and minds of every officer she had trained. And that, I realized, was the most terrifying weapon in the galaxy. The refusal to let death end duty. The determination to transform mortality into legacy. The absolute conviction that some things are more important than individual survival. The humans had taught us that the greatest generals are not those who win battles, but those who create other generals capable of winning wars. Elena Torres had won her final victory not by surviving but by ensuring that her defeat was impossible. Her body was cold, but her command would burn forever.